Hey guys, welcome back to Shop Life. Today we're going to be doing a DIY on the valve cover gasket and spark plugs on this E46. So what I have here is a 2001 325i. The process should be the same for any of the M54 or M52 engines. They're practically the same. So if you have a 5 series, a 3 series, they should all be the same, as long as you have the inline 6. So symptoms for the valve cover gasket. You're going to be smelling burnt oil, any kind of burning smell whenever you have the AC on or heater on or whatever. Whenever pretty much all the air is coming in from the engine bay, that's going to have that smell of burnt oil. You'll also see oil on the heat shields, which I'll show you right now. So you'll see oil on those heat shields. As you can see, I don't have that much oil on the back one, but the front one has a lot of oil. So that means the valve cover gasket is leaking. And you might also have oil burning from the spark plug holes itself, if the spark plug grommets are leaking, which you won't see on the outside. So that's also another possibility. So if you do have any oil leaks, I would go ahead and start doing the valve cover gasket. It's probably about time for it to be changed anyways. And like I said in other videos, the oil filter housing gasket, all those, I'll have separate videos on that. So today we're just going to be covering that valve cover gasket and the spark plugs. The reason we're doing the spark plugs right now is it's pretty much right there when you're doing the valve cover gasket. It's quick and simple, and I mean, for 60 bucks, it's a good, pretty much preventative measure for stopping any misfires that you might have if you don't do them. So what we're going to do today is we're going to start off by go ahead and removing all the little accessories that are in the way of getting to the valve cover gasket to make our job a lot easier. So the parts that I'm going to be using, I have a Felpro valve cover gasket that I got from Advanced Auto Parts. You can order this online from FCP Euro, ECS Tuning, Advanced, AutoZone, pretty much anywhere you can get it. Even the dealer has the Viton gaskets now as well, which are pretty much lifetime. The ones I have are Felpro. I got them for 50 bucks. That includes the little spark plug grommets as well. You can also get the grommets for each and every single bolt. Those are going to be another $8 or $9 at Advanced. They usually do not stock them, so you have to order them and wait a couple of days. Another thing I would go ahead and recommend doing while you're doing all this is also go and do your oil change. You don't have to. You can do a valve cover gasket without changing your oil, but while you're doing a valve cover gasket, you might get some dust or whatever inside the engine. So it's good to do your oil change once you've done the gasket. So let's go ahead and get started. Alright, so the first things that we're going to remove, we're going to go and remove the microfilter cabin air assembly. We're going to go and just take off these tabs right here. Pull these wires out, or you can just pull this whole thing out. To take off the filter cover, you just twist these little push pins anti-clockwise and it'll pop off. Once you have that off, go ahead and remove your filter. This will be also a good time to change your filter if you need to. This one's pretty dirty, but I don't have another one on hand, so I'm just going to leave it for now. And now you're going to remove these 4 bolts, which are T30s. You don't have to remove the bolts completely out, as long as they are out of the actual threads. That way you can go ahead and lift up and pull out. And make sure you take your little weather strip with it so you don't lose that. And you'll have 2 weather strips down here. Make sure they're still in the same spot, so that way when you're seating this back in, it doesn't mess up. Alright, now what we're going to do, we're going to go and remove these covers. They're 10mm bolts and 10mm nuts on this one. If you have these little covers, the vanity cover for the actual bolt hole, just pop that up with a flathead or a pick, and then just remove the bolts. Make sure you don't lose the bolts, so make sure they're just sitting in there. To remove this cover, you will have to remove your oil filler cap. Go ahead and put it back on once you're done. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and disconnect all of the ignition coils and pull them off as well. They're all held in with 10mm bolts. And to remove the connectors, you might have a different connector. You might not have any bolts on your ignition coils if they are triangular. If they are triangular, you lift up the tab, pull the connector out, and then you put your finger in the hole and pull straight out, and that's how you remove your ignition coil. For the people that have the square ones, you're just going to have bolts. I believe the triangle ones start around 2002 to 2003. It could vary, I'm not 100% sure, but if you have the triangular ones, don't panic, you just pull them out without any bolts. To remove the connectors on the square ones, just pry in that little section right here, lift up, and pull the wire out. Now that you have that done, we're going to go in and remove this wiring harness itself. To do that, you're gonna have tabs throughout this whole little, the harness connector. So just pry on the tab a little bit so you can pull it up, like this right here. They are very brittle, so just be careful. Now you are gonna have a ground cable if you have this style harness. It's gonna be an 8mm nut right on the valve cover itself. It will be very helpful to have some kind of magnetic tool to retrieve any nuts or bolts that you drop. That way, before you pull the valve cover off, you can take them off so nothing falls into the engine. Once you have that off, just go ahead and put it to the side. Now we're gonna go ahead and remove all these little connectors that are just harnessed onto the valve cover just to keep them in place. So here's all the connectors. As you can see, there's oil on here from the valve cover itself. If you do have your secondary air pump line, so if you have the square style connectors, your secondary air pump system should look just like this. And you'll have a line going from this nipple all the way to the back of the manifold. If they haven't been replaced, they usually do break. So just be cautious. If they do break, you can get a 3/16 vacuum hose or a fuel line hose. And you can find that at any auto parts store. So if you would, just go ahead and buy that just in case if you haven't replaced that before. And if it does break, that way you don't get a vacuum leak. This is how it's gonna look. Just go ahead and put this to the side. Now we're gonna go and remove all these ignition coils. They're held in with 10mm bolts, like I said before. Now we're going to go ahead and pull off all the coils. They just pull straight out. As you can see, this one has been replaced. Let's not break this camera too. Alright, so now all these holes is what the spark plug goes into. Right now is not the time to replace the spark plugs because we are going to take the valve cover off first. And you don't want anything falling into the spark plug holes either. So let's go ahead and pull off these little ground cables. They're held in with 8mm nuts. Go ahead and pull both of those off. Make sure you get all 3 nuts, the ones that was right here for the ground cable for the harness, and then the 2 for the ignition coils. Now that we have that off, go ahead and take off the actual cables. Make sure you remember where they go. Now we're actually going to pull off the valve cover itself. So to do that, you're going to have to remove all the 10mm bolts. One thing you want to do when you remove the nut, you want to also remove this grommet with it, just like that. And this is the grommets I was talking about earlier that you should replace. I didn't have any in stock near me, so I'm not gonna replace them right now. But you should replace them. And this is my girlfriend's car, so for all those people that might be thinking, why would I do that to a customer? Don't worry, this car's staying with us, so it's not going anywhere. Another common issue with these valve covers is after a certain, since they are plastic, after a certain amount of heating cycles, they do tend to warp. So even after you replace your valve cover gasket, if you know you did your gasket 100% proper and it's still leaking, more than likely what you have going on is your valve cover itself is warped, or it could also have developed a crack. So when you take it off, just make sure you inspect it for any cracks. Try, if you have any like straight edges or whatever, try to see if it is straight or warped, whatever. Just take a look at it before you reinstall it. So once you have all of the nuts and grommets off, what you're going to do is you're going to disconnect this breather hose. So push this tab on the top and one straight on the bottom directly underneath. Push it and pull off, just like that. Try not to bend this too much, especially if you're not replacing it. It might crack in the middle or on top. And then you can just pull this off. If yours is stubborn, what you're gonna do is get a rubber mallet and make sure it's rubber and just tap around all the edges very, very lightly. Tap it, try to tap it down a little bit, just move it around a little bit and then it should pop up. And this is how the 208,000 mile engine looks. So it's not too bad. It seems like it was leaking from right here, a little bit right there, and inside the little spark plug holes a little bit, but not too bad. Alright, now we're gonna go ahead and remove the old gasket. It's actually not too bad. It doesn't seem bad. As you can see, I can still move it around. It's not all dry and brittle. Let's go ahead and put the new one on. Make sure you go ahead and push it in all of the little grooves. Alright, so now what you're going to want to do is go ahead and clean the head itself wherever the valve cover is sitting. And wherever you see these little half moon looking things, you can go ahead and put some kind of red RTV or some kind of gasket maker or something like that if you want to. I personally don't put it. I've never had any issues with it. If your valve cover gasket is getting dry and brittle again and it's starting to leak, that will prevent it from leaking for a little bit. It's not going to hold over for too long anyways, so why even bother? If it's bad, you're going to have to replace it regardless. So I just go ahead and leave it as is. I just clean the head, make sure there's no oil or dirt on it, and then just put it back on. Alright, so once you have the valve cover back on, go ahead and hook up the breather hose. You'll hear it snap in. Now we're going to go ahead and put all the grommets and all the nuts back on. You're going to just finger tight them for right now, and then we're going to do a star pattern starting from the inside, going out, and just go a star pattern when we're tightening it down. That way the valve cover doesn't crack and there's even pressure all around it. Alright, so once you have all of the bolts and nuts finger tight, what you're going to do is you're going to start torquing them down. What you're going to want to do is go ahead and use your normal socket wrench, get it as just tight where it's still turning, but you don't have to use a lot of pressure to turn it. And then you'll use your torque wrench and you're going to torque all the bolts down to 10 Newton meters. So the way you want to do it is you want to start right here in the middle. So start with this bolt, then go to that bolt, go to that bolt, then go back to the middle, and go to that bolt, and go to that bolt, go back to the middle, just like that, doing a star pattern, and just do a few turns at a time on each little bolt, and just go all the way around, and keep doing it until you get to the 10 Newton meters. And once you have the 10 Newton meters, then you stop. Don't go any more than that, that way you don't risk stripping anything. So let's go ahead and do that now. Alright, so now that we have the valve cover tightened down, we're going to go ahead and secure all the wires back where they belong. So all of these wires that came around in the secondary air pump vacuum hose, just go ahead and secure all of those. Alright, so now all the wires are secured. If you're not going to be replacing your spark plugs, you can go ahead and skip to the next step, which is to go ahead and put the coils back on. But I'm going to go ahead and replace my spark plugs. So what you're going to need is you're going to need a 5/8 inch socket. They make special spark plug sockets. It's the same thing as a 16 millimeter socket. So we're going to go ahead and loosen all the spark plugs out, and then go ahead and pull them out. Alright, so here are the spark plugs that we're going to be putting in. The BKR 6E-QUP by NGK. Now what you want to do is go ahead and get your spark plug socket on an extension, and you're going to go ahead and get the spark plug on the socket itself. You're going to turn it anti-clockwise first, so if you were trying to loosen it, and then you'll feel the spark plug drop into the head, and basically you'll probably even hear a little click. So just go ahead and turn and try to listen for it. It fell in right there. And then you just go ahead and hand tighten it as much as you can. And go ahead and do that for all 6. Make sure when you are dealing with this, there's a rubber thing. If you're using a spark plug socket, there's a rubber little grommet in there which helps pull the spark plug out of the hole. So make sure every time you take it out that rubber grommet is still there. What you can also do is get a deep wall 16mm socket or another 5/8 and just use that when you're reinstalling, because you're not trying to pull it back out anyways. Just make sure you always turn it anti-clockwise and wait until the spark plug drops. And that's for any car. It doesn't matter if it's a Honda or a Beamer. Always do that. Alright, so once you have all the spark plugs hand tight, you're going to go ahead and tighten them down, torque them down. You can torque them down to about 22 foot-pounds. If you're applying anti-seize on the spark plugs, then that torque spec is going to be completely different, and you're just going to have to research that on your own. I never put anti-seize on them, especially where we live. It doesn't really get corroded or anything like that, and this car is going to be driven every day anyways. So that's up to you. Alright, so once you have all of the spark plugs torqued down, let's go ahead and put the little ground straps back on. And these were held in with the 8mm nuts. Once you have that down, we're going to go ahead and put the coils back in. And then we're going to go ahead and put all the 10mm bolts back in. And then you're going to go ahead and tighten these down as well. Now we're going to go ahead and get the ignition coil harness back on where it's supposed to be. Just make sure you line it up with all the clips where they were. And you'll just hear it clip back in. There's a ground cable, make sure it goes back where it belongs. Put the 8mm nut on there. Alright, so once you have that done, we're going to go ahead and plug everything back in. If you have the triangular ones, you probably didn't need to do all of this. So just go ahead and lift up the little triangular piece, slide the little connector in, and then push it back down. For us, we're just going to go like this. Lift this little bar up, push that in, and secure it with the bar. Alright, so now we're going to go ahead and put the vanity covers back on. Make sure you take off the oil filler cap. Get the cover lined up. Put the oil filler cap back on. Then go ahead and tighten the 10mm nuts. Make sure you put this one on last. There's two clips, one right here and one right here, that slide underneath this little bar on the intake manifold, and then you can go ahead and put the bolts in. Now we're going to go ahead and put the microfilter housing back on. So get to line up, make sure all of these weather strips are on properly. And then once again, these are T30s. You can go ahead and hand tighten them as much as you can. Now we're going to go ahead and put these wires back underneath. The one that goes from the positive terminal to the other side of the bay goes in first. Then the ignition coil harness goes in closest to you, and then you can put the cover back on. Once it's clipped back in, you can go ahead and put the actual filter back and then the cover on top of there. And then these push pins, just turn them to tighten. And there you have it. Now what I would highly recommend is go ahead and change your oil. What you would do first is turn the car on, let it run, let it warm up, and let it cool down for about 5 minutes, and then change your oil in your oil filter. If you guys have any questions, any comments about this valve cover gasket or any other DIYs, feel free to comment down below and subscribe to my channel if you like my videos. And if you want to stay tuned for more DIYs, vlogs, I try to upload as much of stuff as I can. Thank you guys for watching.